Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and wherever you may be watching or listening to Key Time Sports. It's Key Time coming back with another one to talk about the NBA playoffs from last night. Now, we had a couple of game ones that happened last night and a game two that happened last night. And here's a few questions that I will bring up throughout the show. Can the New York Knicks ride this momentum that they got last night into game two? Is the Denver Nuggets on the cusp of getting swept by the Minnesota Timberwolves? And can the Oklahoma City Thunder avenge, well, not avenge, but can they show up and show out when it comes pressure, when the moments become pressure packed? That is that and everything else on Key Town Sports right now. The first game I want to get into is the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks. Game one was last night. I said that the New York Knicks would win in 7 games, and last night they pretty much it was a tight game throughout. It was a wire to wire game. One team had the lead, another team didn't. But one thing I can say is the New York Knicks did something that I knew that they were going to do. They double teamed Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton is the Indiana Pacers' best player. So Tyrese Halliburton had only 6 points last night because there was a lot of double teams coming his way. That is exactly what I said in yesterday's show. Make those other guys beat you. And Miles Turner had 23. Pascal Siakam had 19. A few others had 18 points. TJ McConnell had 18 points. And Aaron Naismith had 12 points. Also, Obi Toppin had 12. So now we all know if you make Tyrese Halliburton a facilitator, the Indiana Pacers will not win this series. For the Indiana Pacers to win this series, Tyrese Halliburton has to put up 25 to 30 points every game. But last night, I liked how the New York Knicks, they defended him, made him give up the ball. It was always somebody on him. He had one or two dribbles, somebody on him, and then they brought the double teams. And then that's when those other guys, they can't necessarily, they can make those shots, but they can't do it consistently. Like I'm gonna say this. Two players to be exact for the Pacers who can't make the shots consistently off of Halliburton's double teams. Ben Shepherd, he played 18 minutes, only had 8 points, and also Isaiah Jackson played 13 minutes and only had 8 points. When it comes to the Indiana Pacers, they are the worst in defensive rating when it comes to keeping people under 100. They didn't keep anybody under 100 throughout the season. Every game that they have played in, the opponent has scored 100 points or more. So that shows you that Indiana doesn't emphasize defense. Now, the New York Knicks, polar opposite. Top 5 in defense when it comes to all NBA statistics. Now, with the New York Knicks, they have game 2 is coming up. Can the New York Knicks protect home court and put the pressure on the Pacers to win game 2? If the Pacers do not win game 2, I wouldn't be surprised if they protected home court, send the series back to New York for game 5 with it being tied 2-2. But roughly, in my estimation, what I seen from the Knicks last night, as far as cohesiveness, they 3-pointers, they were great from 3-point range, 11 of 23 free throws. They only missed 4 free throws, 22 of 26. Also, what really won the game for the New York Knicks is rebounds. Defensive rebounds, New York had the advantage in that. Offensive rebounds, New York had the advantage in that. Total rebounds, New York had the advantage of that in that. So, the New York Knicks, up and down, they are the better defensive team. Will that win this series? I think so, but we still got 7 more games to look at. We still have at least 6 more games to look at. So, that's all I got for the Pacers Knicks series. The next series I want to talk about is the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Denver Nuggets. I don't know what to say about the Denver Nuggets now. But one thing I'm gonna say is this is the worst I've seen the Denver Nuggets play in the last 3 years. Now, 2 years ago, they made it to the conference semis, lost. Last year, won the NBA Finals, NBA champion, and now you're down 2-0 against an almighty Minnesota Timberwolves team that's got a young dog at the helm in Anthony Edwards. And then you got Karl Anthony Towns. What Minnesota has that Denver doesn't in this series, they have so much height and length. I mean, most of these guys that's on the Timberwolves are 6'3" and above. When it comes to Anthony Edwards, he's 6'4". Mike Conley, he's 6'2". Rudy Gobert, 6'7". So they got height. They have the height advantage on their side. Now, that's not nothing to take away from Denver. Denver, they got some injuries. I mean, Jamal Murray, he got a lingering injury from the previous series with the Los Angeles Lakers. So now the Denver Nuggets are down 2-0. This is the first time that they have been down 2 games in a series, 2-0 after 2 games in a series since 1973. And in 1973, the Denver Nuggets came back and won that series. So what history tells us, this series isn't over. But when you got a team, Minnesota, they're just better. What I'm going to say is that Minnesota, they are playing at a different level, a different scale right now. I mean, Denver, we all know what Denver can consistently do, but as you can see, Nikola Jokic, he didn't score his normal points last night. He only had, in 39 minutes, he only had 16 points, and plus he was 5 of 13. So when it comes to that, and then you have Jamal Murray, he only had 8 points last night. 8 points, and Michael Porter Jr., I don't know where he went at, but he only had 9 points last night. The only person that came that scored double figures outside of Nikola Jokic was Aaron Gordon with 20 and Justin Holiday with 13. So what the Denver Nuggets have to do is, I believe if they lose game 3, then this series is over, because Minnesota, they are not going to lose 4 straight games. That's if they win game 3. I said that the Nuggets would win this in 7 games. But just like I say, if they don't win game 3, if the Denver Nuggets do not win game 3, this series is over. It might already be over because bench production, Minnesota has the advantage over these past 2 games. starting lineups as far as production. They have that, and Minnesota has the advantage through these two games. And plus last night, as far as shooting percentage from the floor, Minnesota was 50%, 42 of 84. From 3-point range, 13 of 33. And free throws, they were 9 of 14. So that was all in their favor. Now one thing about it, the rebounds, the total rebounds, Denver out-rebounded Minnesota. Offensive rebounds, Denver out-rebounded Minnesota. Defensive rebounds, they were the same amount of rebounds. Now, one thing that hurt Denver last night was shot selection and turnovers. Denver had 16 turnovers in the entire game, and Minnesota only had 12. Also, points in the paint. Now, one thing Minnesota does very well, they get their points in the paint. Last night, they had 52 to the Denver Nuggets 34. Obviously, the Denver Nuggets, they've had trouble, like I said, throughout the regular season, they have had trouble defending the Minnesota Timberwolves, and it has showed through these first two games of this series. Now, the Denver Nuggets, they are in between a rock and a hard place. Denver, if you lose game 3, then the series is over, because Minnesota, they are not going to lose 4 straight games and go on to lose the series, because they got some young dogs over there, and it starts with Anthony Edwards, then it goes to Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, who can come off the bench and give you 15 to 18 points per game. Last night, he only had 5. So that's what I'm saying. The guys that can come off the bench for the Minnesota Timberwolves can impact the game. Also on Denver, they can impact the game too. But it's like with Jamal Murray, I know Mike Malone, he might have to switch his lineup. He might have to have Murray come off the bench and start Reggie Jackson, because Reggie Jackson, he is another guy that can defend. He's another guy that can defend well. And you don't wanna wear down Jamal Murray playing him for most of the game, and then when you need him in those last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, he fails to show. You don't want to run the risk of that. So what Mike Malone should do is start Reggie Jackson, and then in the fourth quarter, have Jamal Murray, the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, come in and put the finishing touches on. But one thing about it is Denver has to keep Anthony Edwards in check, Karl Anthony Towns in check, Jaden McDaniels in check. They also got to keep the players that come off the bench. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he had 14 last night, and Naz Reid had 14 last night. So you also got to keep those guys in check. And that is easier said than done, because what I've seen after these two games is Denver, this is going to be a tough drag-out series. Hopefully it does not end in a sweep, but all the momentum is in favor of the Timberwolves right now. They went and got 2 in Denver. They coming home for game 3 and 4. And who knows? Did the Denver Nuggets play their last home game last night? We will see. Now on to the next series I want to talk about is the Cleveland Cavaliers and Boston Celtics. Game 1 is tonight. Now Boston Boston, Boston has the home court advantage. So even if this does go to 7, which I'm not predicting that it will go to 7. I think if it does go to 7, the Celtics will win. I'm gonna say Celtics in 7, but I think they can close it out a little bit earlier. Now, I'm gonna get to what the Celtics need to do as far as defensively. Defensively, they need to get the ball out of Donovan Mitchell's hands and make Evan Mobley and those and Donovan Mitchell's supporting cast beat the Boston Celtics. They really do, because Donovan Mitchell, we already know Donovan Mitchell can take over a game. He did it against Orlando in game 6, and he did it in game 2 with Orlando. He had 45 points, and then he had 50 points in game 6 in the previous series. Now, when it comes to Boston, if the threes are not going in, get into the paint. Get into the paint. We do not, if you are a Celtics fan, I know you do not want to see 3-4 times the Celtics come down the court, jack up a 3, and it hit back iron, and then the Cavaliers have the ball. That's empty possessions there. So for what this series, it really should be over in about 5 or 6 games. But I'm gonna say I'm gonna just give reasonable doubt, because we know that the Celtics sometimes can get 3-point happy in 2 or 3 of these games, and then all of a sudden the opponent gains momentum and then they win the game. So I'm gonna say Boston in 7, but I expect it to be over within 5 or 6 games. This should be a gentleman's sweep as far as I'm concerned. And the next series I'm going to talk about, and this is going to be the last series I talk about before I get out of here, the Dallas Mavericks and Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, the question I said earlier in the show is the lack of experience for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Will that show up in this series? Or if they're able to win this series, will that show up in the Western Conference Finals? Now, with this series, with this series, Oklahoma City, they don't have a big man. They really don't have a big man. And I know a lot of people say that Chet Holmgren is their big man. No, he ain't. He's a slasher. That is exactly what he is. He is a slasher. Now with the Dallas Mavericks, they got some big men. They will have as far as the rebounding advantage, it will be in the Dallas Mavericks' favor. And plus, the Mavericks, they have experience, because 2 years ago, they got to this point and lost to the Warriors. So they have experience. Oklahoma, one of the second youngest team in the NBA, and this is the first time that they have got home court advantage in the Western Conference since 2016. So I'm going to say Dallas wins this series. I'm going to say it. Dallas wins this series in 6 games. Now, one thing, Dallas, this game 1, it's theirs for the taking, because they know they have experience. When it gets to this time, when they get to this round in the playoffs, the deeper rounds in the playoffs, Dallas has experience. OKC, they don't have experience. Now, it's going to come down to about 2 or 3 games in this series where it's going to be tight coming down the stretch, and we are going to see what the Thunder can do, if they will rise to the occasion or will they fold under pressure. As far as my series prediction, I got Dallas winning this in 6 games. And with that, those are my series predictions, reactions, and outlooks for tonight's games. So please like, comment, share, subscribe, click the notification bell to get notified of all of my content, reaction videos, and etc. And remember, one last thing I always say, remember, the key is always on time.